Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in our series of March of the Machine Commander deck techs. I'm covering every legendary creature from the March of the Machine main set in no particular order, plus the extra legends from Mom Jumpstart, the special pre-release promos, and if there's interest, maybe even the non-face legends from the Mom Commander product. So if you have a request for a March of the Machine Commander you'd like to see me build, or a way you want to see me build them, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today our commander is Heliod the Radiant Dawn, Theros' god of the sun. Heliod was a major character and antagonist in both the original Theros block and in Theros Beyond Death. During the March of the Machine story, the Phyrexian Chrome host completed Heliod's followers, corrupting their worship and ultimately completing him. He's slain by Kaya later in the story, but that doesn't mean we can't build a sweet commander deck for him. But before we get to it, let's take a look at my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why they're cool and why I put them in the command zone. So whatever they ask of me is what my game plan is. This is 30 cards toward what I want to do at the table and how the deck tries to win. 30 more cards go into these three categories of support for that game plan: card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I'll usually run 1 or 2 Wraths, sometimes more if it would help the game plan, sometimes none at all, but I almost always keep to my floor of 38 lands so I can get my spells out of my hand and into play. So let's take a look at Heliod. Heliod the Radiant Dawn is 2 and double white for a 4/4 legendary enchantment creature, god, that says when Heliod enters, we return target enchantment card that isn't a god from our graveyard to our hand. So a little bit of recursion right there. And we can transform Heliod for 3 and a Phyrexian blue at sorcery speed. Transforming Heliod this way means we pay either 3 mana and a blue mana, or 3 generic mana and 2 life. That's how Phyrexian mana works. And then once we transform him, Heliod becomes a 4/6 legendary enchantment creature Phyrexian god named Heliod the Warped Eclipse, with 2 abilities. We may cast spells as though they had flash, and spells we cast costs 1 generic mana less to cast for each card our opponents have drawn this turn. So that means we want to take advantage of our opponents drawing cards, and that probably means we're casting them at flash speed on their turns. So as I mentioned, while Heliod is a god, he's not really a good guy. In all his stories, his vanity and arrogance visit tragedy upon his people and himself. He lusts for worship and reverence, his jealousy leading him to murder the planeswalker Elspeth, his champion. But Elspeth lays him low in the end, fighting her way back from the underworld and defeating him with a shadowy version of his own spear before leaving him chained beneath a giant boulder. How's that for irony? It's funny, you read these stories and Heliod's character feels, simplistic. He wants what he wants, and he's too full of himself to think ahead or plan around the possibility of his failure or really do anything other than shove his way forward and act shocked when he loses. It's as though it doesn't really matter whether his machinations succeed or not. Everything he is and does is a result of hubris on a godlike level, a mytho-poem of how selfishness and self-aggrandizement can lead to wreckage and ruin. This deck can win games, but that's not its main goal. It's meant to serve as an object lesson, a Socratic example both of destruction and of the pride that goeth before it. The big plays we make show us to be a force of strength at the table, but one which seems dangerous rather than redoubtable. We establish ourselves as a force of good for all, but each action we take while purporting to help everyone comes at a cost paid by everyone but us. Our opponents may see us as a powerful ally, but we both know that all alliances are temporary. We are a villain, and the mask is slipping before the game even begins. We want to get Heliod out early and transform him soon as possible, so we keep hands with white sources and trust the blue will come. Once we flip our commander, it stops mattering what cards we have in hand. We cast whatever we can, taking advantage of Phyrexian Heliod's second ability. Sequencing matters only so far as it helps us maximize our spells cast. Most of all, we play our wheels, spells which make everyone at the table discard their hands and draw new ones. Heliod offers this as both a blessing and a curse, forcing our opponents to do the best and worst things in Commander, draw cards and shuffle their libraries. And all their draws fuel his cost reduction, letting us play out new spells every time. We cast spells endlessly, and on their turns, making it clear that we're the threat, but each of our actions seems undone by the next. We mill our opponents, but then they shuffle their graveyards back when we have them wheel. We draw and empty massive hands, but our sacrifices and discards return to us when we shuffle back up. Each of their hands is an ephemeral thing, an oracle's dream of a future that may not come to pass. Our Wincons are so incremental that defeating us becomes a Sisyphean battle, one that may be inevitable, but feels only Pyrrhic. And sometimes the villain does win, and our opponents can only wonder how they never got enough traction while we were the ones spinning our wheels. You'll enjoy this deck if you love taking game actions, keeping your opponents guessing, or if you just have new sleeves you want to scuff up. This probably isn't a deck you play more than once each game night, but when it comes out, it's a good time. So as usual, at the bottom of this, right below this video, you'll see a link to this Moxfield page that we're going to go over, and at the bottom of that, below the deck, you'll see a considering section, a whole bunch of cards that I didn't include because either they were too expensive for the budget I'm going for, or not synergistic enough. But that doesn't mean they don't work. If you have a different budget than me, or a different aim you want to go with Heliod, the considering section on this Moxfield page is a great way to get some ideas and find a place to start. So we're going to start with part of the namesake of the deck, which is wheels. We have 8 cards that do the wheel thing. Now, what is a wheel? It comes from the card Wheel of Fortune, the term, and it essentially means either discard your hand and draw a fresh 7, or draw up to a certain other number of cards. That's basically a full hand. But it also can mean shuffle your library and graveyard into each other with your hand. Shuffle your hand and graveyard into your library and then draw a fresh 7. So all of these are just about making everyone at the table draw more cards. So we start with Days Undoing. For 2 and a blue, we have a sorcery that says each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, then draws 7 cards. If it's your turn, end the turn. So that first part is the wheel effect. That's sort of what we're looking for whenever we want to wheel. This is a nice little bonus for Days Undoing. If it's our turn, which we don't want it to be when this happens, remember, the backside of Heliod lets us cast things at flash speed, so we want this to be on our opponent's turns, even though it's a sorcery. But if it is the last thing we do on our turn, that's okay. Days Undoing, if we're casting it on someone else's turn, good, because that means we don't lose it. Because ending the turn means several different things. It means we don't move to the end step, it means the turn just ends. Any spells and abilities that are on the stack, including Days Undoing, get exiled. So again, this is not happening if we're casting it on our opponent's turn, it will if it's on our turn. But yeah, everything on the stack gets exiled, everyone discards down to their maximum hand size, and all the damage wears off, and all until end of turn or this turn effects are all ended. It just all happens. We don't get a chance to cast any more spells or anything. So this may not happen to us that often, because again, it only happens if we cast Days Undoing on our turn. But being able to get a full wheel for 3 mana is pretty good, especially when we're going to be likely discounting it. Windfall is another 3 mana wheel, but it doesn't do quite as much. Each player discards their hand, it says, and then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way. So if the hand sizes when we cast Windfall are 3, 4, 5, 6, everyone's going to discard their hand and draw 6, because it's the most cards that anyone else discarded. We don't shuffle our graveyard and hand back into the library with Windfall, but it's a relatively inexpensive way to get a wheel out of this. Again, it's a sorcery, but it may not matter because the backside of Heliod, which is what we want Heliod to be at all the time, lets us cast spells at flash speed. And remember, if we're casting on our opponent's turn, they've already drawn at least 1 card for the turn. So Heliod's backside's second ability is going to reduce this to 1 and a blue, since they've drawn that 1 card. And that applies to basically everything we're playing. Step Between Worlds from Outlaws of Thunder Junction is next. This is a 3 and double blue. Each player may shuffle their hand and graveyard into their library, and each player who does draws 7 cards, and then we exile Step Between Worlds. So this is a may, so our opponents may not want to do this, but anyone who's got fewer than 7 cards in hand is kind of shooting themselves in the foot if they don't do it, unless they just really want their hand. We do have to make it clear that this is a may effect, but it's still a powerful one. However, we can also plot this, which is to say, Plot is an ability. Its cost is not reduced by Heliod's backside second ability, because that only reduces spell casting costs. But if we were, on our turn, to do this, which we do at sorcery speed, we can pay 4 and double blue, and then on a later turn, we can cast Step Between Worlds for free. It says plot only as a sorcery, and cast it as a sorcery on a later turn without paying its mana cost. That means even though we can cast things at flash speed, we have to cast this as a sorcery. So that means we can't play it on our opponent's turns if we plot it. Luckily, we aren't likely to want to do that, because we can Step Between Worlds for just 2 blue, rather than 6 mana and then free later, if we do this on an opponent's turn where they've already drawn 3 cards. One of the things that's great about wheels is we can often wheel into another wheel, and we do it a second time, and we've discounted our spells by quite a lot because all of our opponents have drawn a lot of cards. And remember, Heliod's backside cares about each card our opponents have drawn. So if each of our opponents draws 1 card, all of our spells are discounted by 3, assuming, of course, 3 opponents. So Time Reversal is next. 3 and double blue for a sorcery that does the wheel thing. Each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, draws 7, we exile Time Reversal. A lot of these cards exile themselves, but not all of them do. Just like Days Undoing and Windfall don't do that. Unless, of course, Days Undoing is cast on our turn, in which case it's on the stack when it's resolving and it gets exiled as part of that, part of ending the turn. Game Plan is another fun one. 5 and a blue for a sorcery that lets us do the wheel thing. Everyone shuffles their hand, a graveyard into their library, draws 7, and we exile Game Plan. But it does have Assist, which means any other player can pay generic mana up to 5 of this, or it's one other player, but another player can pay some mana into this if they want to. That's fine if they do, but it's pretty easy for us to have drawn, or to have had our opponents draw a total of, among them, 5 cards on one turn, one of their turns, so we can get this 1 mana perfect wheel, even without the assist. Next is Emergency Powers. I love this card, back from Ravnica Allegiance. 5, a white, and a blue for an instant, so this is already at instant speed, that says each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, then draws 7 cards, exile Emergency Powers. So that's just a straight up wheel, but it has an addendum, which means if we cast it during our main phase, we can take a permanent in our hand with mana value 7 or less and put that card onto the battlefield. So this is a really nice little bonus, but even if not, it's still just a 7 mana wheel that we can get down to 2 mana, just the white and the blue. Hopefully we can cast this on our own turn, though. Sometimes we'll want to do that. We'll want to spread the draw around, whether it's wheels or any other kind of mass draw, which you'll see we have quite a lot of, including these wheels. And we'll be able to discount Emergency Powers on our turn so we can take advantage of this addendum ability. Next we have Temporal Cascade, very expensive, another 7 mana one, but it's actually more. 5 and double blue for each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, or each player draws 7 cards, or if we entwine it for 2 generic mana, both. Which means this is a total of 9 mana for a wheel. It's very expensive, but we can certainly discount it all the way down to double blue if we're able to. But it's okay if we just say, yeah, everyone just draw 7 cards. In all likelihood, our opponents don't have unlimited hands, so they're going to have to discard spells from this anyway, or discard cards from this anyway, I should say. And this just gets us that discount we need anyway. Each player draws 7 cards, means we've got 7 extra cards in hand, and we have a discount of 21 on all those spells, 21 generic mana. So it is worth noting that if we entwine these and we get both, they do resolve in order. So we can't make our opponents draw 7 cards and then shuffle their hand at the graveyard into their library. They do the shuffling before they draw the 7. So if we want to reset hands and graveyards, we can. If we want to draw 7 cards, we can, or for 2 more, or maybe not any 2 more, depending on our cost reduction, we might be able to do both. Finally, we have Commit to Memory. Commit to Memory is a split card because it's an Aftermath card. It's a removal spell, but also a wheel. So the commit side, which we can cast from our hand, is 3 and a blue, which says put target spell or non-land permanent onto its owner's library, second from the top, into its owner's library, that is. So this is an instant. We can hit spells with this, meaning if somebody casts a removal spell on Heliod, we can commit that removal spell and it'll go second from the top of their library. If we want to hit a non-land permanent, including their commander, we're going to tuck that into their library. Now, if we try to do that with their commander, they are allowed as a state-based action to instead put their commander in the command zone. It won't actually go into their library. But if they do choose to put it in their library, they've made a fatal flaw. They may think, oh, it's second from the top, I'll just draw it in a minute, especially because you're having us draw a bunch of spells. Yes, but we're also wheeling, dear friend. So Memory, the second half, is 4 and double blue for a card with Aftermath, which means we can only cast it from the graveyard, and when we do, we exile it. So Memory is each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, then draws 7 cards. It doesn't have to specify that it's then exiled because that's part of the Aftermath, and we can only cast Memory as when it is in the graveyard, so using Aftermath. But it's worth noting that whatever spell we have put into their library second from the top, if they haven't drawn it yet, then we can make them shuffle it away along with their hand and their graveyard, and then they draw a fresh 7. And maybe they get that original card back, maybe they don't. I've actually sat at a table where my friend said, oh, it's fine, I'll put my commander second from the top, you can commit it. And I said, great, I'm going to cast Memory right away, or maybe I cast it the next turn, because with it still just on top of their library. And they had to shuffle their commander away. They chose not to put it in the command zone, because that shuffle doesn't cause the commander card to change zones. So if they've chosen to let it stay in their library, it's going to stay in their library until they can draw it. So these are our wheels. We want to be able to do these pretty often because they let the backside of Heliod discount our spells by quite a lot. We have plenty of other ways to take advantage of us drawing cards or our opponents drawing cards, but the wheels are the namesake of the deck, so I wanted to talk about them first. We have a little bit, I know you're excited about this, of mill in this deck. Just a tiny touch. I mentioned in the introduction that mill is not really a big win con for us, especially because we're wheeling. You know, if our opponents put a bunch of cards from their library into their graveyard, and then they have to shuffle their graveyard and hand back into the library, the mill hasn't really done much of anything. So this is a little bit of a tertiary, I guess, win con, but we have enough of it that I wanted to bring it up first before we get into our big part of our game plan. So we start with Fascination. Fascination is X and double blue for a sorcery that says we can either choose to have each player draw X cards or mill X cards. A little bit of mass mill, that's kind of nice. It is a backup for us, I suppose, because really what we want is for our opponents to all draw cards, because then that would discount our X by quite a lot for, other X spells. If we've already had our opponents between them draw, let's say, 3 cards in one turn, well, then we can decide X is 3 and just play double blue and say X is 3, we've got the discount of 3, and everyone's going to draw 3 cards or mill that many cards. Either way is fine. We're not worried about putting our cards in our graveyard because we can just wheel later. We're probably going to draw into one. And if we have an enchantment in our graveyard, well, maybe we haven't played Heliod yet, and we can pull that enchantment right out with front side of Heliod's Enters trigger. As you'll notice, we have 10 enchantments in the deck. One of them is Heliod itself, so really only 9 cards we can pull out with Heliod. It's just sort of a mechanic we're not using much, but it can be helpful if we've got a bunch of mill going on, or if we've drawn a lot of cards and then had to discard. We might be able to put an enchantment into our graveyard and get it back. Next up we have Folio of Fancies, which is 1 and a blue for an artifact from Throne Veldrain. Love this card. Players have no maximum hand size. That's every player. Don't have to worry about it. We can say for double X and tap, each player draws X cards, which we would have to hard pay for because we don't get a discount for that since it's not a spell we're casting. Our commander won't help us. But we can also, for 2 and a blue and tap, we can make each player mill cards equal to the number of cards in their hand. So if we've created some way to get a lot of cards in our opponent's hands, and remember, they have no maximum hand size, we can just pay 3 and tap this to make everyone mill that same number of cards. So, wheel and woe. Next up is Drown in Dreams. For X and 2 blue, we have an instant that says choose one, but if we control a commander as we cast the spell, we may choose both instead. In case you're confused, this part that says as you cast the spell means when we put Drown in Dreams on the stack, if we had Heliod in play, we can choose both. If Heliod is removed while Drown in Dreams is on the stack, it's fine, we still get to choose both, because it doesn't say we have to control a commander as the spell resolves. It's just as we cast it. And putting it on the stack, the process of putting it on the stack is casting it. So what it lets us do is, very similarly to Fascination, it lets us either have target player draw X cards or target player mill twice X cards. So if we can get this number quite high, the X, which we can by saying, let's have our opponents all wheel. So all 3 of our opponents have drawn 7 cards, so our spells are discounted by 21. So we could pay a single blue and say X is 19. 19 plus 2 is 21, plus that blue lets us cast Drown in Dreams and have a player mill 38 cards, which is twice 19. That's pretty good. Or we can just have a player, which could be us, draw some cards. Next we have Psychic Corrosion, which is the most millie card we have in here, and it's just fun to do. 2 and a blue for an enchantment, one of our enchantments, that says whenever you draw a card, each opponent mills 2 cards. It hits all of our opponents. It works every time we draw cards. If we wheel ourselves and we draw 7 cards while this is out, our opponents are all milling 14. All 3 of them. And so Psychic Corrosion is so annoying, but it's also, because of that, not super strong. The wheels are negating a lot of our mill, but our opponents, people tend to hate mill. I know why, but it's just sort of an assessment that it doesn't need to have, which is why this is great removal bait. We play a 3 mana spell, which we may be only casting for 1 mana, and this enchantment sits on the battlefield annoying our opponents until they're willing to spend, a powerful removal spell like Generous Gift or something along those lines to blow up our 3 mana enchantment that wasn't doing that much for us anyway, other than bothering our opponents, which saves our better pieces from that Generous Gift. Next up, we have Struggle for Project Purity. This is technically a mill spell, but we're not using it for mill in this deck, although it's got the option, so I wanted to show it to you. Struggle for Project Purity is 3 and a blue for an enchantment from the Fallout set that says, as it enters, we choose Brotherhood or Enclave. We're generally going to choose Brotherhood, which says at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent draws a card, and we draw a card for each card drawn this way. Which means, if we've got 3 opponents, at the beginning of our upkeep, each of our opponents draws a card, which means all of our spells are discounted by 3, since that's the number of cards drawn that way. And we get a free Ancestral Recall, drawing cards equal to that same number. This all assumes we get that discount from the backside of Heliod, but assuming we have that, which is the first thing we want to do in this deck, having the Brotherhood side happen during our turn gives us a good reason to cast spells on our turn rather than on our opponent's turns. We also, however, have the Enclave side, which we can choose, which says whenever a player attacks us with 1 or more creatures, that player gets twice that many rad counters. So they get twice as many rad counters as the number of creatures they're attacking with. So what is a rad counter? Well, I'm glad you asked. Rad counters are counters that go on a player. They don't go on any of the player's permanents. They're just on the player itself. And then at the start of that player's pre-combat main phase, so after their draw step, around the time that they would be dealing with sagas or anything like that, if they have any rad counters, they mill a number of cards equal to the number of rad counters they have. And then for each card that they milled that is not a land, they lose a rad counter and a life. Which means if they mill 4 lands because they have 4 rad counters, that's it. They just milled 4 lands. They don't lose any life, but they keep their rad counters too. So these stick around and will trigger at the beginning of each of their pre-combat main phases, of course, until they don't have any rad counters left. So Struggle for Project Purity rather, is a good way to disincentivize players from attacking us. Unless, of course, they're paying attention to the fact that mill isn't really what we're doing. It just looks like it is. But you never know. Might be something worth trying. Rad counters are a little annoying. Generally, Struggle for Project Purity is just very strong this way. And this is an excellent enchantment to get back with Heliod's Enters trigger if we have to recast Heliod, or if somehow we've gotten Struggle for Project Purity into the graveyard before Heliod comes out the first time. Finally, we have the Water Crystal from the Final Fantasy set. 2 and double blue for a legendary artifact that says blue spells we cast cost 1 generic mana less to cast. Just discounts all of our blue spells 1 more than what our commander is giving us based on our opponent's cards drawn this turn. In addition, if an opponent would mill 1 or more cards, they mill that many cards plus 4 instead. So we just add 4 to the number of cards milled whenever opponents mill cards. A little annoying again, but just fine. In addition, however, we can pay 4 in double blue and tap the Water Crystal to make each opponent mill cards equal to the number of cards in our hand, which might be quite a few cards. And remember, this second ability affects this. So they're going to actually mill cards equal to the number of cards in our hand plus 4. So again, kind of annoying. They're having to worry about all of these cards being thrown directly in their graveyard that they don't have access to, unless of course they are a graveyard deck. If we are playing with an opponent who's running a graveyard deck, we should probably make friends with them. Say, here, I'm here to help you. I'm going to do as much milling as I can to put your stuff in your graveyard so you can use it, but I won't target you for my targeted mill unless we're willing to be friends. Now, we don't have a lot of targeted mill. It's usually pretty universal, but they don't need to know that. In any case, being able to discount all of our blue spells when our deck is mostly blue by 1 generic mana is going to help us a lot. So that's our mill section. Let's take a look at our biggest game plan section, which is what I've called Mass Draw. Mass Draw means these are spells that make everyone draw cards, or allow everyone to draw cards. Which is to say, with the backside of Heliod face up, these are spells that make all of our other spells cheaper. Sometimes we may be casting spells for free because of this, because our spells are discounted by generic mana. And if we have cards like Howling Mine that only cost generic mana, then we can pay 0 for them. But we're going to start at the beginning with Mind's Aglow, a really fun card that we can definitely show to our opponents and say, look, we're a group hug deck. I'm just trying to give you all lots of cards, which is true. For a single blue mana, we get a sorcery with Join Forces that says, starting with you, each player may pay any amount of mana, and then each player draws X cards, where X is the total amount of mana paid this way. So the idea is, other than the blue we pay for this, once it resolves, we pay some mana, and so does the next opponent and the next, until everyone has paid 0 or more mana. And then however much total mana was put into that pool is the total number of cards everyone gets. It may be the case that someone doesn't pay any mana at all and ends up drawing 10 cards because the other players have put 10 mana in. We don't, again, count that first blue mana, but it's pretty easy for us to say, we want to pay 1 blue and then 4 or 5 mana. And then it doesn't really matter if our opponents don't put any in, because every one of them is going to draw 4 or 5 cards, and then that's 12 or 15 mana worth of discount that our commander's giving us if the backside is up. So it is worth noting that we do actually have to pay the mana. We can't use Heliod's discount as a virtually, I have paid this much mana. It actually has to be mana we've put in. But with Mind's Aglow, drawing cards, I mean, most people are going to put 1 or 2 mana in, and that could end up being 7 or 8 mana very easily. Next is Prosperity, just a classic. X in a blue, each player draws X cards, sorcery speed. Very simple. If we've already had everyone draw 1 card, then X is discounted by 3, assuming 3 opponents, and we pay a single blue, and each player draws 3 cards. That's just 1 blue for an Ancestral Recall for us, and everyone else gets it too, which now means a 9 mana discount. We have several different X spells in here, and I've separated them out on their own, which we'll see much later in the video. But just to remember, because that discount from Heliod works based on our opponents having drawn cards, we can make a lot of use of these X spells for not much cost to us. Next is Arcane Denial, one of our very best removal spells. For 1 and a blue, we get an instant that says counter target spell. Its controller may draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, and we draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. So Arcane Denial is a straight up, full-on counter spell. We don't have to worry about it being a non-creature spell or something like that. And it replaces itself on the next turn's upkeep. But not only that, it replaces itself, and in all likelihood, on that turn, it discounts all our spells by 2, because it means the controller of that spell at the next turn's upkeep, whether it's theirs or not, is going to draw 2 cards. Now, they don't have to draw any. They could draw 1 because it's up to 2. But why would they draw less than 2 if they can help it? They're probably going to draw 2, which just helps us. And because that next turn, unless that turn is our turn, then it means one of our opponents is drawing 2, and whichever opponent, whoever's turn it is also drawing a card. So our spells are discounted by 3 from that. All of that for 1 or maybe just a single blue, or like 1 and a blue or a single blue mana. Arcane Denial is great in this deck. Fascination is next. For X and double blue, we can choose to have each player draw X cards or each player mill X cards. Again, it's that classic, everyone mills or everyone draws. Just good mass draw for us. We've seen Folio of Fancies, how it can have everyone draw cards. Howling Mine is just a real classic in this deck. I'm just delighted to see this card again. I started playing in the mid-90s, and I used to have a bunch of white border versions of Howling Mine. Anyway, for 2 generic mana, we have an artifact that says at the beginning of each player's draw step, if this artifact is untapped, that player draws an additional card. So this is us, instead of having a single mana discount, just base on every one of our opponent's turns, it's a 2 mana discount. And it means on our turn, we're going to get an extra card as well. Howling Mine is absolutely worth it for just 2 mana in this deck. Similarly, though, we have Kami of the Crescent Moon, originally from one of the... Saviors of Kamigawa. Yeah, one of the Kamigawas. So Kami of the Crescent Moon is a 1/3 legendary spirit for double blue that says, essentially, Howling Mine. It doesn't even matter if the Kami is tapped. So at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. Just 2 cards for everyone? Sounds pretty good to me, especially with the discount that it gives us. We also have Quain, Itinerant Meddler. Quain is a white and a blue for a 1/3 legendary rabbit wizard that we can tap to make each player draw a card, and then each player who drew a card this way gains 1 life. So, again, we tap Quain, and our spells are immediately discounted by 3, because our 3 opponents have each drawn a card, so that's 3 opponents who've drawn cards, so our spells cost less from the backside of Heliod. The fact that our opponents are getting life from that is fine. We're not really worried about their life totals anyway, until at least they're low enough that we can kill them. Especially because it also gives us a card and a life, because it's not each opponent, it's each player. Quain is a great piece in a group hug strategy, and us sort of cosplaying as a group hug deck is emphasized by having Quain in our deck. Next up is Sky Scribing. This is such a cool card. X and double blue for each player draws X cards at sorcery speed, but it has Forecast. This is from way back in the day in Dissension. Forecast means for 2 and a blue, we can reveal this card while it's in our hand, and each player draws a single card. So we just pay 3 mana and flash this card, and then everyone draws a card, which means we draw a card and our spells cost 3 less, because each of our opponents, 3 of our opponents, have drawn a card this turn. So we might want to do that over and over and over, just to give ourselves a bigger and bigger discount. We can even use that discount on Sky Scribing itself. Now, we don't get a discount by using Forecast, because Forecast is not a spell we're casting. It is an ability of this card. But let's say we have 2 and triple blue in our hand, or in our mana base available. We cast 2 and a blue, or we use Forecast, rather, to we activate it for 2 and a blue, draw a card, because each of our opponents does as well, and then we cast Sky Scribing for X equals 3, which we don't have to pay, because each of our opponents has drawn a card, so our spells are discounted by 3, we declare X is 3, get the discount, we just pay the 2 blue, and everyone has drawn an additional 3 cards. So for a total of 5 mana, everyone draws 4 cards, which means, what is our discount? Is it 12? I think so. That's assuming we have more mana to cast things, or some colorless artifacts or such to be able that we can cast. But yeah, Sky Scribing is really nice. Vision Skeins is next. An instant for 1 and a blue. Each player draws 2 cards. Pretty good, even without the discount. We pay 1 and a blue on an opponent's turn. Everyone draws 2 cards, so we have 2 extra cards in our hand, and all of our spells are discounted by 6. That's enough to cast some of our very big wheels just immediately. Pretty good. In a way, it's a little bit like a ritual now that I see it, because we're spending 2 mana, and we're getting, essentially, we're not getting 6 mana out of it, but we kind of are. We're getting a 6 mana discount. So if we're only casting 1 more spell, it's like we spent 2 to get 6, and we got 2 cards on top of it. So did our opponents, but are they going to be able to use their cards as well as we can? Are they going to be able to use them before we wheel them away? We'll see. Words of Wisdom is a little similar. 1 and a blue for an instant that says we draw 2 cards, and then each other player draws a card. So this is from Odyssey. It lets us pay 2 to get 2, which is pretty great, and then to get a 3 mana discount as our opponents each draw those cards. That's all right with me. Next is Blue Sun's Zenith. Now you don't have to play this printing, but I love the Strixhaven Mystical Archive, so I definitely would. For X and triple blue, we have an instant. It's an instant on its own that says 1 player is going to draw X cards, and then we shuffle Blue Sun Zenith back into its owner's library. So we get to just throw it back into our library after we make somebody draw X cards. It might be us, or it might be an opponent where we say we're going to pay 3 blue and whatever amount we want, and that's the discount we're going to get, that whatever we want, the X, for the rest of the turn, because one of our opponents has drawn that many cards. This is a great political tool. It lets us say, hey, do you want a couple of cards? Will you not attack me over the next turn, or not bother me, or not stop the next thing I'm doing if I give you 3 cards, or 4 cards, or 8 cards? It may be that we're paying that much mana into this, but if our opponents have already drawn several cards, we don't even have to pay that. We might be able to make X something we don't have to pay at all. For triple blue, X could be 6, we don't know. And then it just doubles our discount if we choose a different player, an opponent, to draw those 6 cards. Plus, we're going to get Blue Sun Zenith back eventually once we draw our way into it, which we will. Maybe even with Cut a Deal. Cut a Deal is 2 and a white from Baldur's Gate. For a sorcery that says each opponent draws a card, and then we draw a card for each opponent who drew a card this way. 3 mana for us to draw 3 cards and get a 3-card discount, or a 3 mana discount on our spells for the rest of the turn. That seems pretty good, especially when it only gives each opponent 1 card. You know, kind of eat your heart out, Vision Skeins. Not true, Vision Skeins is better, but Cut a Deal is also very good. We've seen Days Undoing, and it's one of our wheels. Dictate of Crufix, which they reprinted in Foundations, so cool, is 1 and double blue for an enchantment with flash. So we can just flash this in, probably on the end step of our opponent to the right, so it happens right before our turn. And it says at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. It's just Howling Mine its effect again. But we can flash it in, and we get to take the first advantage of that if we want to. Now this is a deck where we might not want to do that. We might want to play it on our turn or on another opponent's turn to give our opponents extra card draw, which again may cause our opponents to have to go to the cleanup step and discard cards because their hands are so full. That's usually not an advantage for us because they have a lot of card advantage they can use. But it does give us those discounts, and those discounts can give us some really strong things. In addition, Dictate of Crufix doesn't cost that much, and it's an enchantment that we can flash in, which means if it's in the graveyard when Heliod comes into play at first, we can pull it right back out. We've seen Drown in Dreams, of course. Now we have Lauren of the Third Path. Love Lauren for the Brothers' War. 2 and a white for a legendary human artificer. She's a 2/1 with vigilance, and when she enters, we destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. Lauren is a disenchant. She's a reclamation sage. She's a removal piece. We can also tap her when she no longer has summoning sickness to make it so we and an opponent each draw a card. So a great way for us to do a little bit of politicking and to get a little bit of a discount and a card on top of it. Next is Oblation, one of our best removal spells. For 2 and a white, we have an instant that says the owner of target non-land permanent shuffles it into their library, then draws 2 cards. So any non-land permanent we want to get rid of, we can get rid of. And after we do, we've got a 2-mana discount on our spells for the rest of the turn, assuming the backside of Heliod is up. If we do it to ourselves, which we can turn this into our own card draw. But probably better to look at this as the best version of Generous Gift, like 3-mana destroy any non-land permanent. I know Generous Gift can hit lands, but we don't do that in our decks too much. We've seen Windfall. It can wheel us. But what about your Temple is Under Attack, also from Baldur's Gate? 2 and a white for an instant that says we either choose to pray for protection, giving all of our creatures indestructible, great way to protect our commander, who will be annoying our fellow players, or we strike a deal. We and one of our opponents each draw 2 cards. So we sort of get refunded 2 mana in the form of that discount. It might be more than 2 mana if we're casting multiple spells after your Temple is Under Attack. Very nice. We've seen Struggle for Project Purity and how we probably want to choose the Brotherhood mode. What about Intellectual Offering? For 4 and a blue, we have an instant that says choose an opponent, you and that player each draw 3 cards. Then choose an opponent. Untap all non-land permanents you control and all non-land permanents that player controls. So another great politicking piece. We do not have to choose the same opponent for each of these effects, especially when this first one draws us 3 cards and discounts all of our spells for the rest of the turn by 3, thanks to Heliod the Warped Eclipse. We can then have our creatures that we've attacked with, perhaps, untap. We can have our mana rocks that we probably have, untap. We don't untap our lands, but this is not as powerful for us as this first ability, but it's pretty nice, and we can definitely use this as a look. It looks like you're probably going to get attacked on your next turn. What if I untap all of your creatures so you can block? Sounds pretty good. We've seen Step Between Worlds and Time Reversal. These are some of our wheels. Now we have one of our best cards for actually winning the game. It's Forced Fruition with the Wilds of Eldraine Enchanting Tales printing. For 4 and double blue, this is an enchantment, so we can get it out of the graveyard with Heliod's Enters trigger. It says whenever an opponent casts a spell, any spell, doesn't matter, any spell, they draw 7 cards. So we're on our opponent's turn, let's say. We have Heliod's backside up, we have Forced Fruition in play. They draw a card for the turn, and we have a 1-mana discount. They cast a spell, Forced Fruition triggers, and they draw 7 cards. And now we have an 8-mana discount. You've seen all of those X spells that we've gone through? Every one of them is going to have a huge discount, and we can just cast as many as we want. But then, let's say they cast a second spell. Well, they're going to draw another 7 cards. So that turn, they've taken 2 spells out of their hand, but they've put 14 more cards into their hand. They've got a lot of good card advantage, but if they don't have an unlimited hand, they're going to have to discard a lot of those things. Forced Fruition is not necessarily mill, but it does put a lot of cards in our opponent's graveyards and get them out of their library. So this can be really annoying for our opponents. And so therefore, it's something that they'll fight over about, do I remove this? Do I not remove this? Do I get a bunch of advantage out of it and then remove it? Which is to say they're using their removal spells, which we may have put in their hand, on something that isn't our commander. Game plan is a wheel. Emergency powers is a wheel. Well of Ideas, however. This is 5 and a blue for an enchantment that says when it enters, we draw 2 cards. That's a nice little bonus. And then at the beginning of each other player's draw step, that player draws an extra card, so it's another Howling Mine. And at the beginning of our draw step, we draw 2 additional cards, so it's better than Howling Mine for us. It helps us more than everyone else, but it definitely gives us that extra bit of discount on our opponent's turns. And an Enters trigger of drawing cards. This is just great. I want the biggest hand in the world. We've seen Temporal Cascade and Commit to Memory. Memory, of course, is a wheel, so is Temporal Cascade, and Commit is a removal spell. So those are our 30 mass draw spells, and that's most of our game plan. We're just here to make our opponents draw cards and use those cards that they've drawn and the discount that Heliod's backside gives us to cast more of our spells, and just keep wheeling and starting over and doing more of it until we're able to beat them somehow. How do we beat them? We're going to see. But first, we're going to talk about these support categories, starting with card advantage. Now I know it doesn't feel like we need a draw section, which I use the word draw here like I do in all my decks, just as a shorthand for the concept of card advantage. It doesn't mean all of these spells necessarily draw us cards. I did not include all the mass draw spells in here, even though they all will draw us cards, or can, but a few of them have some overlap. We're going to start with Finale of Revelation. Finale of Revelation, originally from the Brothers' War, but they did reprint it in Foundations for $1. Pretty good. It is X and double blue for a sorcery that says we draw X cards. And then, if X is 10 or more, we instead shuffle our graveyard into our library, draw X cards, untap up to 5 lands, and we have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. So we want X to be 10 or more. We want to draw 10 cards, and we want to wheel first. Now this is not in the wheels section because it doesn't affect our opponents, but we have 2 cards, this being one of them, that can wheel us. As long as we pay into Finale of Revelation high enough. We want to be able to shuffle our stuff up, draw 10 cards, and then untap up to 5 lands, so we're able to do even more stuff on our opponent's turn, or on whichever turn we're casting this on. Plus, we don't have to worry about having a hand limit for the rest of the game. We do exile Finale of Revelation, of course, because it is a wheel. But yeah, pretty good. We've seen Howling Mine, draws everyone a card. This and Kami of the Crescent Moon are in this section and the Mass Draw section, because while these do draw everyone cards, it's not simultaneous. So we may be able to play Howling Mine and only get the benefit on us, or the same thing for Kami of the Crescent Moon. At least it's drawing us a card, even if, for whatever reason, it may not be drawing our opponent's cards. Ominous Seas is next. Ominous Seas is 1 and a blue for an enchantment, so we can bring it back with Heliod's Enters trigger, that says whenever you draw a card, put a foreshadow counter on this enchantment. Foreshadow counters have no inherent mechanical meaning, but the rest of Ominous Seas cares about them, because if we remove 8 foreshadow counters from this enchantment, we make an 8/8 blue Kraken creature token. This is at instant speed. So if we've drawn, let's say, 40 cards, whether they're through wheels or otherwise, then we're going to have 40 counters on Ominous Seas, and we can crack them to put 5 8/8 creatures into play whenever we feel like. That's great. People forget about Ominous Seas all the time. They swing in, we suddenly have at least one 8/8 blocker. Yeah, it's a solid card. And these 8/8 Krakens, depending on what kind of combat's going on between our opponents themselves, sometimes someone leaves themselves shields down in order to beat one of our other opponents, and they forget that right before our turn on the end step, we can take a bunch of counters off of Ominous Seas and put a bunch of Kraken into play and just swing in and maybe just kill them. It's in the draw section of our deck, however, because it has cycling for 2 generic mana. Cycling means while this is in our hand, we can pay 2 and discard this to draw a card. The reason that's great is because maybe we discard this before we get Heliod into play. So we're getting a free card draw, well not free, we're having to pay the 2, but we're getting a card draw out of it without losing Ominous Seas because Heliod comes in when he does, and we get to put Ominous Seas back in our hand because it is a non-god enchantment. Next, we've seen Blue Sun Zenith. It can make target player draw X cards, so it's in this section. Midnight Clock is our other pseudo wheel. It's a wheel that only affects us. This is actually a mana rock for a little while. For 2 and a blue, we have an artifact that taps for blue. That's great. And for 2 and a blue, we can put an hour counter on it. Now, like those foreshadow counters on Ominous Seas, hour counters don't have an inherent meaning. It's just the rest of Midnight Clock cares about them. Because at the beginning of each upkeep, we put an hour counter on Midnight Clock. Each upkeep is to say our upkeeps and each of our opponent's upkeeps. And when the 12th hour counter is put on Midnight Clock, we shuffle our hand and graveyard into our library, draw 7 cards, and exile Midnight Clock. So that means this only has to be in play if we've got 3 opponents for 3 turn cycles. Because each upkeep, an opponent's going to put it in, we're going to put a counter on Midnight Clock on each opponent's upkeep. So by the time it gets back to us, that's 4 counters. It has to do that 2 more times, and we've hit 12 counters, and we get to wheel. Pretty all right. We lose out on our ramp piece in the meantime, but it's not terrible. And if we want to accelerate things, we can pay mana into it to put extra counters on it, and maybe this happens at the start of an opponent's turn during their upkeep. And it's from Throne of Eldraine, so it's great. That's my favorite set. I just really like it. And look how cool the Castle Vantress art is on it. Anyway, another card I enjoy is Smuggler's Share. 2 and a white for an enchantment, so we can get it back with Heliod's front side. that says at the beginning of each end step, draw a card for each opponent who drew 2 or more cards this turn. Then create a treasure token for each opponent who had 2 or more lands enter the battlefield under their control this turn. So Smuggler's Share is here as our... It's a little cheaper than, but far less powerful than, Smothering Tithe. Smothering Tithe would be fantastic in this deck, but I don't put Game Changers in my decks because I want to keep their budgets down and their power levels sort of pre-con-ish. In any case, even if this second half of the trigger ever helps us, even if we never get treasure because an opponent doesn't ramp any lands into play, we're pretty likely to draw some cards during each end step. Because even during our turn, our opponents are probably going to be drawing 2 or more cards. So that means maybe if we draw cards on our end step, we may have to discard, but it's okay if we do, because we're going to be discarding the cards we need least and keeping the best ones. But then during our opponent's end steps, we don't have to discard for having more than our hand limit, if we have a hand limit. And probably, if it's during opponent A's end step, we might draw a card for all 3 of our opponents, because if all 3 of them drew 2 cards or more during that turn, we draw a card for each opponent. So that's a free 3 cards during that turn, free on top of whatever we've also drawn and forced them to draw. Smuggler's Share seems pretty good. Sad Robot is next. Solemn Simulacrum, most recently from Foundations, is 4 generic mana for a 2/2 artifact creature golem. 4 generic mana meaning if our opponents total have drawn 4 or more cards and we have the backside of Heliod up, we can cast the Sad Robot for free. We don't have to pay any mana because the discount is at least as high as its casting cost. What does it do though? When the robot enters, we Rampant Growth. We search our library for a basic, we put that land on the battlefield tapped, and we shuffle. And when the Sad Robot dies, we can draw a card. So it is a little bit of card advantage when it dies, but we're really doing this to be able to ramp with it. But what's nice about that is, if we ramp with it and then we block with it and it dies, we're going to get this card draw, and then when we wheel, it goes right back into our graveyard, or into our library rather, to do it again. We've got a little bit of recursive abilities that way for our lands that you will see soon. Next up, also from Baldur's Gate, is the Council of 4. 3, a white and a blue for a legendary human noble that is a 0/8 great blocker that says 2 things. Whenever a player draws their second card during their turn, we draw a card. So this has got to be during a player's turn while they're the active player. So that does count us though. So if we draw 2 cards on our turn, even if it's just a single card after the one we drew in our draw step, we draw an extra card. And whenever a player casts their second spell during their turn, which is a lot more likely if our opponents have big full hands that we're going to be giving them, then we create a 2/2 white knight creature token. So these knights are going to come up a lot faster than you think. And even if all they do is stand next to the Sad Robot and block, they're going to be able to block pretty well along with their 0/8 creator. The Council of 4 gives us plenty of repeatable card advantage and extra tokens that we can use for whatever we need. Next up is Shark Typhoon from Ikoria, the same set that Ominous Seas came from. 5 and a blue for an enchantment, so we can bring it back with Heliod. And we might even just be paying a blue for it, I'm just saying. That says whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we make an XX blue shark creature token with flying, where X is the spell's mana value. That means if we cast, let's say, Emergency Powers, we make a 7/7 flying shark. If we cast Midnight Clock, we make a 3/3 flying shark. If we cast Blue Sun Zenith with X equals 10, even if we're not paying the mana into the 10, X is equal 10, and on the stack, that means it has a mana value of 13, so Shark Typhoon is going to trigger and make a 13/13 flying shark. This is a great win con for us, just getting a whole lot of flying sharks, just a bunch of evasive attackers that we can swing in when our opponents aren't expecting it. Shark Typhoon does have cycling, however, for X 1 and a blue, so we pay 1 a blue and any amount other, discard it from our hand to draw a card, and when we do that, we make one of those shark tokens, where X is equal to the amount we paid beyond the 1 and a blue. So Shark Typhoon, a great thing we could do, just like Ominous Seas, we can cycle this to get a surprise blocker or surprise attacker on our opponent to the right's end step. We suddenly have a flying shark. maybe even a 1/1, that's all we need. And then we play Heliod and get Shark Typhoon back from the graveyard to our hand. We've seen Emergency Powers and how it gives us a wheel, but Emergency Powers also has the Addendum ability, which lets us put a permanent directly from our hand onto the battlefield if we cast Emergency Powers during our main phase. That is not... that's not part of the wheel effect, really. So it's card advantage. It's getting us to have something else we're able to play without having to worry about paying for it. In a way, that's kind of ramp, but I think of it as card advantage, especially since we've just wheeled. If I'm wrong about calling that card advantage, let me know in the comments below. All right, we've seen our card advantage section. Let's talk about acceleration. Again, I've just used the word ramp to represent acceleration. Not everything in this section is necessarily ramp, although I think in this deck it is. Most of these cards, as you see, are colorless, which means we can cast them very easily for nothing, or almost nothing, thanks to the backside of Heliod's ability. Astral Cornucopia is the most challenging of those, but also the most satisfying if we can make it work. This is an artifact that costs triple X mana, which means we have to pay a multiple of 3, or we have to designate, we have to set the amount we're paying, the total cost, at a multiple of 3. Not the total cost, the initial cost. In any case, XXX for an artifact that enters with that many counters on it, X counters, and then it taps to make one color of mana, and to make one mana of that color for each charge counter on it. So let's say we want it to have one counter on it. We have to pay it, its cost is going to be a 3. If we want 3 counters on it, its cost is going to be 9, because 3, 3, 3. If we want 8 counters on it, its cost is going to be 24. But if our opponents have all drawn 7 cards this turn, because we had the wheel, then we have a discount of 21. 3 opponents each draw 7, that's 21. So we could then cast Astral Cornucopia with X equals 7, which is a total of 21, then discounted by 21. So we've spent 0 mana to get an artifact that taps for 7 mana of one color. That's how we use Astral Cornucopia in this deck. We hang on to it, unless we just really need the mana, until we can get a big, big discount. Even just getting it out with 2 counters on it is better than a Manolith, and we're going to be able to ramp quite a lot with that. Sometimes this is a free Soul Ring, or better. Pretty good. So next up is Soul Ring, as I mentioned. Everyone knows Soul Ring. Costs 1, taps for 2, you want it in your deck. It's too good to ignore. Wayfarer's Bauble also costs 1, but it's an artifact that if we pay 2, tap and sack it, we get to Rampant Growth. Search our library for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. This is a great thing we can recur with our wheels. So we use Wayfarer's Bauble to get a basic land out of our deck and start using it next turn. Then if Wayfarer's Bauble is in our graveyard, when we wheel, we might draw it again and be able to do that right away. And because it's an artifact, we may not have to pay this 1. If we're doing it on a turn where an opponent has drawn a card, which every opponent's doing on their turns at least, we might be Wayfarer's Bobbling on an opponent's turn, and then we do have to pay the 2 to sack it. But that's okay. That's a free Rampant Growth for us every time we have it in our hand and we play it on our opponent's turn. It's not free, I'm sorry. It's a bonus Rampant Growth, I should say. It costs the same as Rampant Growth is what I mean. Arcane Signet is 2 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. Terrific card. 2 mana, it's a 2 mana rock that taps for white or blue. That's what we want. We've also got Thought Vessel. It's another 2 mana rock, also comes in untapped. It only taps for colorless mana, but it also gives us no maximum hand size. So very worthy in this deck, even if it doesn't make colored mana. And again, we can maybe play it for 3 for free. Decanter of Endless Water is the upgraded version of Thought Vessel, in that it is a Manolith. It's a 3 mana rock that taps for 1 mana of any color, but also no maximum hand size. So also, again, Baldur's Gate. I keep bringing up Baldur's Gate, just a good set. So Decanter of Endless Water might cost us nothing, come in untapped, tap for mana of any color, and prevent us from having to discard due to our hand limit. We've seen the Midnight Clock, taps for blue for as long as it's around. Now we have Skyclave Relic. This one's just really cool in this deck. 3 mana for an artifact with Indestructible that taps for 1 mana of any color, so it's a manalith. And when it enters, if it was kicked, create 2 tapped tokens that are copies of this artifact. And it has Kicker for 3 generic mana. What that means is we can either pay 3 and it's an Indestructible manalith. Comes in untapped, taps for mana. Or we can pay 6 and it comes in and it's an Indestructible manalith that comes in with 2 tapped copies of itself. Both the 3 and the 3+3 for 6 are discounted by our commander's backside ability. So if we've had opponents draw at least 6 cards, we get Skyclave Relic and its 2 copies kicked for free. Pretty good. We've seen Smuggler's Share and how it can make treasures for us, which maybe it will. We've seen the Sad Robot, how it rampant growths for us. It almost certainly will. And we've seen the Water Crystal discount our blue spells, which is pretty great. So there we go. That is our acceleration section. Let's talk now about interaction, which again I've just shorthanded as removal here. Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares are both excellent cards and are almost the same as each other. They are both 1 white mana, they both are an instance, and they both exile a target creature, and they both give a kickback to that creature's controller. Swords to Plowshares gives that creature's controller an amount of life equal to the creature's power, and Path to Exile lets that creature's controller rampant growth. Search for basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. Both incredibly powerful removal spells because they're instants, they only cost 1, and they just exile a creature, just get rid of them. We've seen Arcane Denial, it just counters any spell, and it gives us some little bits of bonuses as well, drawing us a card, and because it draws our opponent cards, it gives us a discount on the next turn. Curse of the Swine is another X spell, so we can get X to be quite high if we need it to. It is a sorcery for double blue and an X that says we exile X creatures, and for each creature exiled this way, its a controller creates a 2/2 pig, 2/2 boar token. That means we're getting rid of all the scary creatures and just turning them into, well, they're not bears, they're boars, but yeah, just little 2/2 generic creatures. Exile means they can't recur them, and we can hit as many things as we want, assuming we can pay for X with that. This might be the scariest board wipe people can see during the game. Get rid of commanders, get rid of big Eldrazi, whatever we want. It just turns into pigs. Emergency Eject is 2 and a white for an instant. I've put this in a lot of decks now as a way to destroy target non-land permanent. Just blow up a non-land permanent. And then its controller makes a lander token. Lander tokens are Wayfarer's Baubles, which we saw a moment ago in the ramp section, the acceleration section. They're artifacts that if you pay 2, tap, and sack them, you get to rampant growth. So I like this better than Generous Gift, because Generous Gift is 3 mana, and they get a 3/3 out of it, which can be useful. And, you know, Generous Gift is great because it can hit lands, but I'm not generally in these decks looking to hit lands. I want to hit a non-land permanent. So I would normally cast Stroke of Midnight, which is destroy a non-land permanent, and its controller makes a 1/1 human from Wilds of Eldraine. I think Emergency Eject is an upgrade to Stroke of Midnight because it makes them a token that can't block, and they can get land with it, but they've got to pay for it. So I think Emergency Eject is very strong for these purposes. Imprisoned in the Moon, another great enchantment that could easily go to the graveyard and us recur it. 2 and a blue for an aura that enchants a creature, a land, or a planeswalker. And it says enchanted permanent is a colorless land with tap to add colorless mana and loses all other card types and abilities. So Imprisoned in the Moon, the classic use for it, cast it to enchant an opponent's commander. It shuts that commander down and turns that commander into just a land. If there's a way for them to get that commander back into their hand or into the command zone, great. Maybe they have to blow up their own land. That's the challenge. Who's running land destruction in a way that they can target so reliably? Now, they might be running enchantment destruction, which is good, because that means they're having to spend that on something other than Heliod, because remember, our commander is also an enchantment, so our commander can be naturalized or disenchanted. But then, Imprisoned in the Moon is in the graveyard. So we can get it back out when Heliod comes out and put it on whatever else is scariest, which again, maybe someone else's commander. We've seen Lauren of the Third Path and how Lauren will disenchant something when she comes in. We've seen Oblation, which is also, 2 and a white to get rid of a non-land permanent, but it does so by shuffling it into the controller's library, the owner's library rather. But then they get 2 cards, which is good for us. Next up is Hullbreaker Horror. Love this card, and it's so good in this deck. 5 and double blue, which means we may only be paying double blue for it. For a 7/8 Kraken Horror with flash, and it can be countered. And whenever we cast a spell, which all of our spells are going to be at flash speed when Heliod's on his backside, so we get to either return a spell we don't control to its owner's hand or return a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. That first one is not a counter spell, but it might as well be. You cast a spell, well, put it back in your hand. You're going to have to cast it again if you want to get it out. And that's happening when we're casting a spell and getting the benefits of our spell. Even better, return a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Bounce your token. Oh, it's gone forever. Bounce your commander. You're going to have to recast it, albeit not with your commander tax. Bounce your big scary artifact or your biggest enchantment or your planeswalker that is about to ultimate. We can even use it to bounce our own things because it says spell we don't control or non-land permanent. It doesn't say that we don't control here. We can use this to protect Heliod if we want to. Hard to do because we might be doing this on an opponent's turn. We use it to bounce Heliod to protect Heliod from being destroyed, but now Heliod's in our hand and we don't have the ability to cast spells at instant speed anymore. Which is fine. We wait until our turn, replay Heliod, reflip Heliod, and we're back on track. Because at least the Hullbreaker Horror is still going to be around, and it's a 7/8 monster. Pretty scary. Finally, we have Commit to Memory. Commit, as we know, puts a spell or non-land permanent, so we can hit spells, of course, again, into its owner's library second from the top. Seems good to me. Last for the support section, we have our Wraths. We're only using one. It is Tragic Arrogance. I was going to use a couple of other options that I have they're all in the considering section, looking at our Wrath possibilities, but I chose Tragic Arrogance because this is Kithian. This is the man who will become the Planeswalker Gideon. And this thing that happens on Theros thanks to Heliod. So it's hilarious, not hilarious, it's sort of a Greek irony that this Tragic Arrogance that Heliod participates in is so representative of Heliod himself. I thought it was just a good flavor win to choose this for the Heliod deck. It is a sorcery for 3 and double white that says for each player, we choose from among permanents that player controls an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker, and then each player sacrifices all other non-lands that they control. So everyone's going to have their lands, but at most, 1 artifact, 1 creature, 1 enchantment, and 1 planeswalker. Remember, Heliod is an enchantment. So if we don't have another enchantment that we want to protect, we can keep one of our other creatures and Heliod, plus any artifact we've chosen. And we're not running any planeswalkers in this deck, but most people I have found don't. So it's not going to be that much of a disadvantage. We get rid of our opponent's best stuff and let them keep their worst artifact, creature, and enchantment. If they're running an artifact land, choose that as the artifact. Because it just says choose an artifact, and then they sacrifice all other non-land permanents they control. It's okay if any of these are also lands. So if our opponent is running a Dryad Arbor, let's say, as one of their creatures, we can choose that as their creature. Is there an enchantment land? If our opponent is running Urza's Saga, we can choose that as the enchantment, and they lose all their other enchantments. Pretty good. So, we've seen our game plan, we've seen the support for the game plan. Let's talk about the other sections that supplement that game plan. We have a few cards that make tokens, for example, that will feed into the things we can do. Starting with Finale of Glory, a great way to win the game, in fact. It's an X spell, so double white and X for sorcery that makes X 2/2 white soldier creature tokens with vigilance. Those are knights, let's be fair. They're knights. They're soldier type because it's Ravnica, but they're knights. They're 2/2s with vigilance. But, like Finale of Revelation, If X is 10 or more, we also make that many 4/4 angel tokens with flying and vigilance. So we get X number of 2/2 vigilant creatures, and if X is 10 or more, we get that many Sarah angels as well. Hard to say no to, especially if we've done a wheel and our opponents have all drawn a fresh 7. So we pay double white, declare that X is 21, and we get 21 2/2s and 21 Sarah angels. We're probably going to win the game the next turn, unless our opponents wrath themselves. And if they do, sets them back as well. We've seen Ominous Seas. It can make these 8/8 Kraken tokens, pretty great. Chasm Skulker is 2 and a blue for a Squid Horror. It's a 1/1, but whenever we draw a card, we put a 1/1 counter on it. So one of the few instances of 1/1 counters in this deck, this Squid Horror can get quite big. And when it dies, we make a number of 1/1 blue squid creature tokens equal to the number of counters that were on this. Those tokens have Island Walk, which means they can't be blocked by anyone who controls an island. So Chasm Skulker is one big creature that's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, it doesn't start big, but it will become big. And once it does, it becomes a mass of little 1/1s. We might make 40 little squids out of this, which is enough to win the game. Our opponent might have 15 creatures, but then less than 26 life, so we attack with all of our things. They eat 15 of our creatures, and the other 25 kill them. So Chasm Skulker can really do a lot in this deck. Alondra, Sky Dreamer. I think related to Talrand somehow, not really sure, but I like her. From Jumpstart 22. Alondra is 2 and double blue for a 2/4 legendary Merfolk Wizard that says whenever we draw our second card each turn, so this happens when we draw cards on our turn and on our opponent's turns, we make a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying. So as opposed to the 2/2s from Finale of Glory that have vigilance, Alondra's 2/2s are Drakes and fly. And whenever we draw our 5th card each turn, so probably only relevant on our turn, but 5th card, we can certainly do that, Alondra and our Drakes get +X/+X till end of turn, where that's the number of cards in our hand. So if we draw, Finale of Revelation, we draw 10 cards, we're going to have Alondra trigger both of these. Our Drake is going to come into play. It can happen first, or this can happen first, either way, because they happen from the same event, Actually, you draw cards in sequence. So this is going to trigger first, so this is going to resolve first. I believe that's right. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong about that. But in any case, maybe we've drawn 10 cards, and that's the only... Maybe our hand was empty before that. We're still going to get +10/+10 on Alondra and all of our Drakes. Now, Alondra doesn't have flying, but a 12/14 is still pretty good as an attacker. And then all of these 12/12s in the air, that just kills people. So what we want to try and do with Alondra, this is sort of an incidental bonus to what we're already doing, but if we're able to, we get a little bit of an army of flying Drakes, an air force, you might say, and eventually cast a big spell, and the Drakes can swing in and probably take an opponent out. We've seen the Council of Four and how they make those 2/2 knights. Interestingly, these soldiers are 2/2s with vigilance, but they're not knights. And these knights are 2/2s but don't have vigilance. I'm calling wizards. Anyway, we also have Shark Typhoon. As we've seen, it makes a variable power and toughness flying shark creature token based on the mana value of the non-creature spell that triggered Shark Typhoon to create the token. So that's how we get tokens, how we supplement our only 14 creatures in the deck by just filling up their board with tokens and mostly empowering them by us drawing cards. We also have X spells. Let's take a look at those X spells. These are spells that, whether they're actually X spells or like triple X like Astral Cornucopia, these benefit a lot from us having the huge discounts that we do. So Astral Cornucopia, as we've seen, can get a lot of charge counters on it and tap for more mana. Prosperity lets everyone draw cards. Curse of the Swine lets us exile a bunch of creatures. Fascination can let everyone draw cards or everyone mill. Finale of Glory makes us a bunch of soldiers and maybe angels as well. Finale of Revelation draws us a bunch of cards and maybe lets us wheel, untap 5 lands, and have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. Skyscribing lets everyone draw cards. Blue Sun Zenith lets someone draw a bunch of cards. And Drown in Dreams lets someone draw cards or mill twice that many cards. All of this based on the X in their casting cost. Next, we have a protection section. These are cards that are meant to protect our commander, because a lot of this is based on a commander we've spent 4 mana on, and then at 3 or 4 mana to flip it over. So we want to make sure we keep Heliod in play, or to protect us. Pippin, Guard of the Citadel, is a white and a blue for a legendary halfling soldier that is a 2/2 with vigilance and ward 1. We can tap Pippin to give another target creature we control protection from the card type of our choice until end of turn, which means if we use this for Heliod, which is what we want to do generally, Heliod can no longer be blocked, targeted, dealt damage, enchanted, or equipped by anything that is the card type we've chosen. So if we say card type creature, that means Heliod gains protection from creatures and cannot be blocked by creatures. The only thing that can block is a creature, so Heliod becomes unblockable until end of turn. We really want to keep this for a moment when an opponent has targeted Heliod with a removal spell, or something along those lines. A bounce spell, an exile effect, whatever we want to do, an aura that nerfs Heliod, like Imprisoned to the Moon. We tap Pippin, and we give Heliod protection from whatever card type that player's removal spell counts as, and Heliod's protected. That means if our opponent wants to use 2 removal spells to make us use Pippin and then sneak in a second removal spell after Pippin's given protection, or before Pippin's protection effect takes effect, sure, that's a 2-for-1 for us. That's okay. We can always get Heliod back. Next is our temple. Your temple is under attack. It gives us protection because we can pray for protection and give all of our creatures indestructible. That can certainly help our commander. Next, we have Platinum Angel. I love to put this card in my decks, and it's just really good in this deck. Platinum Angel is 7 generic mana for an artifact creature angel with flying that says you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game. This card is the best one in our deck that says, I'm not trapped in here with you, you're trapped in here with me. We're going to keep making our opponents mill, keep making them wheel especially, keep making everyone draw cards, and no one can win unless it's us, which we might do with our tokens. We might mill someone out, we might attack with Heliod, and who knows, win with commander damage, win with regular combat damage, just with our Platinum Angel. As long as our angel is safe, we can't lose, and no one else is able to win. And the best part is Platinum Angel is an artifact that only costs generic mana. So we may be able to flash Platinum Angel out for free the moment an opponent is about to win. In response to whatever they're about to do to win the game, we flash out Platinum Angel, or at least, that they're about to do to kill us. We flash out Platinum Angel, and that's the ball game, at least for the moment. Which I guess is not what that's the ball game means, but you understand. Similarly, we have Absolute Virtue from the Final Fantasy set. I think this card is really fun. 6 and a white and a blue for an 8/8 legendary avatar warrior that cannot be countered, has flying, and it gives us protection from each of our opponents. So it says we can't be dealt damage, enchanted, or targeted by anything controlled by our opponents. That means if our opponents attack, we just don't block. And they're not going to be able to do any damage to us. That doesn't mean they can't target our stuff. Our permanents, our spells, don't have protection. So they can definitely attack us with a bunch of things. If we don't block, they can kill Absolute Virtue in response, or rather in the declare blocker step after we've not blocked. And then we haven't blocked and we take a bunch of damage from their creatures. So we've got to watch out for it. But Absolute Virtue is great because it might just cost us 2 mana for an 8/8 flyer that can't be countered. That's a good attacker, that's a great blocker, and it protects us quite well while we have it in play. And if we have Absolute Virtue and Pippin, or your temple is under attack, we can protect Absolute Virtue. So that's our protection section. We have a small synergy section as well. And I recognize that a lot of these sections are small. I want to remind you, these sections are small, but all the cards in the considering section at the bottom of the page on this Moxfield page are also tagged. So we might have quite a few more synergy cards or protection cards or token cards or what have you. So check them out. Ominous Seas synergizes because it gets counters every time we draw cards. Chasm Skulker gets +1/+1 counters every time we draw cards. Alondra synergizes because it gets triggers and gives us tokens whenever we draw our second card each turn, or a big pump when we draw our fifth, which we're going to be likely doing. And then finally, Psychosis Crawler, which is a little bit of a win con for us, which we'll see about in a minute. For 5 generic mana, so again, we can play this at flash speed for free if our opponents have drawn a total of 5 cards or more, and of course we got the backside of Heliod up. For an artifact creature, Phyrexian Horror, its power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in our hand, which don't worry about the wheel effects, because they do have us shuffle our hand and our graveyard back into our library and then draw some more. That means our hand is empty for a moment, but we don't actually check this characteristic defining ability until we have priority to do so, until state-based actions would check. So wheeling does not cause the Psychosis Crawler to die, even though momentarily in the game our hand is empty. It's just not empty at a time when Psychosis Crawler's stats would update. So don't worry about it. In all likelihood, this is going to be pretty big. But more importantly, whenever we draw a card, each opponent loses a life. Each opponent. So if we wheel and we draw 7 more, we've just made 21 life disappear from our opponent's total. Pretty good. That is our synergy section. I have one card in the refund section. Refund cards are cards that untap our lands. It's only one card in this section, but there are several others in the considering section, like I mentioned. Finale of Revelation is here because if we spend 10 or more, or if we decide X is 10 or more, one of the things we do with it is untap our lands, which is something we can put a lot more use to after it's resolved because we've drawn a bunch of cards, and so now we have a bigger discount and can get more out of those 5 lands mana. The last section of spells we have is Wincons. These are cards that can win us the game beyond just some of the other cards we're running. For example, Finale of Glory can make a huge number of soldiers and angels, and it probably will, and that probably will help us win the game. The same is true of Alondra, and how Alondra can make us a bunch of blue drakes, and it's not as many, but we can pump them up quite a bit, and a whole lot of big flyers. We don't have to have a superior board to our opponent to win with a bunch of flyers. Psychosis Crawler, of course, can drain our opponents out, and it likely will quite a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if Psychosis Crawler, during the course of a normal game, eats 15 life from each opponent, maybe more. I've definitely seen it take down 30 or more life from each opponent, just depending on how you sequence your wheels. But we also finally have Labman. Laboratory Maniac is a weird inclusion in this deck, but I've got it here as a little bit of a feint. Laboratory Maniac is 2 and a blue for a 2/2 human wizard that says if you would draw a card while your opponent while your library has no cards in it, you win the game instead. So I wouldn't have included Labman if it weren't relatively inexpensive, because it's really not going to come up in our deck. Probably. Usually, if we're drawing cards, our library's got plenty of cards in it. If our library is getting depleted, we're probably going to cast a wheel and refresh it. That may not always happen. We may find ourselves with 20 cards left in our library, a huge discount on our opponent's turns, and a couple of cards that say pay X and draw that many cards. We may find ourselves in a position to win with Laboratory Maniac. It's not likely, but it's possible. And the fact that it's possible, the fact that we're drawing so many cards, and that Laboratory Maniac is a known threat as an alternate victory condition, makes it removal bait. It means our opponents might say, oh, you have a Labman in play? What are you about to cast? Well, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and kill Laboratory Maniac before you can cast something. We may be able to respond to that, or they may do it with our response on the stack, with our original spell on the stack. It's a lot of fun to see how people freak out over something like this. And Laboratory Maniac is much cheaper than something like Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, or even something simple like Triskaidekaphile. All of these are fun inclusions. None of them really play into our game plan, but again, fun inclusions that make our opponents wonder, what are you doing? Are you just spinning your wheels here? The answer is yes, we are, and we're getting an awful lot out of it, and it might win us the game. Labman probably won't, but he's a fun inclusion nonetheless. So that covers all of our spells. We're going to go over our land base and see if we can talk about why we've built it the way we have. So we're running 20 basics, which is relevant to us because we have a few cards that care about us having basic lands, and we want to make sure we can definitely get untapped land into play so that we can cast our spells right away. Our big discounts don't touch our colored mana pips. So we're going to need these. And of course I've chosen Theros Beyond Death lands because it's Heliod. We're running 12 islands versus 8 plains, even though Heliod needs double white to come out, which is why I encouraged you to keep a hand with white mana in it, because you want to be able to get Heliod out initially, and you don't actually need the blue to flip him because, or to transform him I should say, because you can pay 2 life since it's Phyrexian blue. You need a lot of blue for your spells, however. So this is a balance between sort of the proportions of blue in our deck and the fact that you really want to have white to cast your commander as soon as possible. This is a pretty good mix. And 20 basics means we have good things going on for the things that care about our basic lands, which we'll talk about in a moment. I'm running Irrigated Farmland. It is a bicycle land, which means it is a plains and an island, and it comes in tapped. It can tap for white or blue for us. But we can also cycle it. So we can pay 2 generic mana while it's in our hand to discard it and draw a card. This is just here to be a tap land that can tap for the colors we need. And if we really are desperate to draw an extra card, maybe we can. Maybe we have Laboratory Maniac out and we cast a spell that's supposed to draw us our last card. Our opponent goes to kill Labman. We cycle Irrigated Farmland. We draw that card and we win the game. Not likely to happen in this deck, but in case we need a little bit of card draw, which we almost never will with this deck, but I mean, it's part of the theme, so here it is, Irrigated Farmland. If you wanted to upgrade this, you could probably just put in a Hallowed Fountain, the shock land in white and blue, and that would be a little bit better than a land that comes in tapped every time. I like the bounce lands, so we're running Azorius Chancery. It comes in tapped, and when it comes in, we have to bounce a land from the battlefield back to our hand, which means if it's the first land we play, we have to bounce it itself back to our hand, so we don't want to do that. The reason there's so many downsides to it is because it taps for 2 mana. So it taps for a white and a blue. So we want to make sure that we sequence this correctly, so we're not having to go to our end step or rather our cleanup step and discard cards unless we're really trying to discard an enchantment that we can bring back with Heliod. In any case, Azorius Chancery is excellent for this kind of deck. Make sure we hit our land drops because it puts a land back into our hand for next turn. Really good. We're running Glacial Fortress, the check land. It comes in tapped unless we control a plains or an island, which means we have 20 basics that qualify and 1 non-basic. I think this is the only non-basic that has basic land types on it. So if Irrigated Farmland is in play, or any plains or any islands, Glacial Fortress will come in as an untapped duel. Pretty nice for us. If we wanted to upgrade this, we could do the slow land, which is Deserted Beach in white and blue, because those in Commander generally more consistently come in untapped. But in a deck with 21 lands that have basic types, this is probably pretty good and much cheaper than Deserted Beach. We are running Skycloud Expanse. It is a filter land. There is a different filter land called Mystic Gate that you could side grade into. It might be slightly better, but it's not like strictly better, and it's $4 versus 50 cents. Skycloud Expanse is 1 mana and tap to add 2 mana. So you're tapping essentially 2 mana sources to get 2 mana, and so it ends up working out, but it filters that mana of whatever type you have, maybe it's from your Thought Vessel, into colored mana, which you probably want. The only disadvantage to all this is Skycloud Expanse does not tap for mana without you putting mana into it first. So, something worth keeping in mind. Next, we have our fixing section. These are 6 lands that can help us pull basics out of our library or otherwise fix our mana. We have Command Tower because it's the same reason we have an Arcane Signet. It's an untapped land that taps for either blue or white. That's our Commander's color identity colors. So, yeah, we want to have this untapped duel. Why wouldn't we? We are running Temple of the False God as well. I know some people don't enjoy this card. I think it's very good in the kind of power level decks that I build. It taps for 2 mana, 2 colorless mana, but only if we have 4 more lands beyond it, because it needs 5 or more lands, but it counts itself. That means if our opening hand has Temple of the False God in it, probably not worth keeping unless we have at least 3 other lands in hand, maybe some ramp of some sort. But even a soul land that only works late in, like mid or late game, is still a soul land. It's worth to have the extra 2 mana. Then we have 4 soft fetches. So Evolving Wilds is a land that comes in untapped. We can tap it and sack it to Rampant Growth. Search for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. We have 2 other cards, Broker's Hideout and Obscura Storefront, that do something very similar. They both enter and immediately sacrifice themselves. We don't have to tap them to do so, and we can't hold them up. They just do it on their own. When they do, we search for a basic plains or island, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle, and we gain a life. Broker's Hideout can also find forests, which we don't have. Obscura Storefront can also find swamps, which we don't have. So to us, these are the same card. We can't hold them up the way we can with Evolving Wilds, but we don't really need to in this deck. So all 3 of these cards are fetch lands for basics, which means it helps us with our check land, and it gains us a little bit of life if we're doing the Broker's Hideout or the Obscura Storefront. We also have Myriad Landscape, which enters tapped, and it only taps for colorless. But we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to double Rampant Growth. We search our library for up to 2 basic land cards that share a land type. So in this deck, that means 2 basic plains or 2 basic islands. Usually we'll get the islands, unless it's very early and we just need our 2 white sources to cast Heliod. And then we put those on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So even though this is a little slow, it's a tap land, and we have to pay 2 and tap it and sacrifice it, this is a land that turns into 2 lands. So this is actually ramp in our land base. The cost of inclusion is very low. It's very strong for what it gives us, but it does ask a lot of us. But we get a little bit more out of it, or a good amount out of it, more than we're having to put in. Myriad Landscape is very nice. I also want to make mention, Myriad Landscape, Evolving Wilds, Broker's Hideout, and Obscura Storefront, these soft fetches, when we use them, we're getting basics out of our library. Then when we wheel, these are going back into our library, and we can get basics out again. Until we've depleted our library of basics, they're still going to keep helping us. So deck thinning is something that doesn't really apply, statistically in Commander, but the more we do this, if it's a very long game, it might start helping us. The more times we wheel, we're less likely to see more of our basics because we've pulled plenty of them out every time we've had these soft fetches come into play. So yeah, we may see the soft fetches again and not do too much for us, but that's the price of doing business. We got a lot of cards to draw. We are running Adakar Wastes as a pain land. It taps for colorless, does come in untapped, but it also can tap for white or blue, and if we do tap it for colored mana, it deals a damage to us. That's usually worth it. If we really need to fix our mana, we really need the white or we really need the blue, it's worth 1 damage. And if we don't need colored mana, we can just tap it for colorless. And it comes in untapped. Very nice. I love the pathways. Hingegate Pathway is no exception. Let's see. We use these things for flexibility. They are modal double-faced cards. It either comes in untapped as the Hingegate Pathway and taps for white, or it comes in on the backside up, untapped as the Mistgate Pathway and taps for blue. Whichever we need, we can have it. We don't have to worry about it. Something that's a nice trick with this is maybe we want blue, but we really need white at the time. Maybe we play it as a Hingegate Pathway, and then we happen to have Azorius Chancery in our hand. We put this into play, and we bounce the Hingegate Pathway. Then we can, the next turn, as our land drop, replay this card on its backside as the Mistgate Pathway. So the little bit of play we have, if we happen to have a pathway and a bounce land in hand at the same time, it can be useful to us. We've also got Temple of Enlightenment. It's a scry land. Temple of Enlightenment is a land that comes in tapped, and when it does, we scry one. And then when it untaps, we can tap it for white or for blue. If we wanted to upgrade this, we could go to the Meticulous Archive Surveil land. Pretty powerful, but it's not 50 cents, so pretty good for that. Last are our utility lands. We are running 5 of these. Demolition Field goes in most of my decks because I've mentioned a couple of times I don't want to use land destruction, just because in Commander, whether you know who you're playing with or you don't, a lot of times people see it as rude. Really, it's mass land disruption that's rude, or in most pods, people think of it as rude. But sometimes you just need some spot removal. Sometimes someone's running a Glacial Chasm, or a Maze of Ith, or a Rogue's Passage, and they're going to kill you with their Voltron commander. To slow someone down, it's okay to blow up one land, to have one source of something you can get rid of problem lands. And if you want that to be your generous gift, go for it. I like Demolition Field because the cost of inclusion is so low. It's an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap and sack it to destroy a non-basic land an opponent controls. They then search for a basic and put it on the battlefield and shuffle. It's not even rampant growth because it comes in untapped. And then we do the same, which means they've lost a land and we've lost Demolition Field, but then they get a basic and we also get a basic. So no one's down a land drop, or no one's down a land in play, assuming they have any basics left, and so do we. So yeah, this is a nice little utility piece for us. Gaia Reach Sanitarium is an untapped land. It's legendary. It taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 and tap it to have each player draw a card and then discard a card. It doesn't have to be the same card, of course, so it's not actually a mill, unless, of course, that player only has no cards in hand. But this is a way for us to trigger having people draw cards. It gives us a little bit of card selection, as it does with everyone. But we notice if we're tapping 2 lands and Gaia Reach Sanitarium, that's 3 mana that we're kind of missing out on. But then 3 of our opponents have drawn cards. So with the backside of Heliod up, we're neutral. Or if we're casting 2 spells after this, we're ahead, because we've got a discount of 3 on 2 different spells that we're casting, as opposed to just paying that 3 from our 3 lands and not being able to pay it again on our second spell. The same concept is true of Mikakoro, Center of the Sea. This is a legendary land that also taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 and tap it, and each player just draws a card. There's no draw and discard, it just draws. It's a little more expensive than Gaia Reach Sanitarium, but having this kind of redundancy, if we just really need to draw a card or we need our opponents to draw, it's a nice way to get it. We've got Reliquary Tower. It comes in untapped and gives us no maximum hand size. Pretty solid. And finally, Tyrite Sanctum from Kaldheim originally. Tyrite Sanctum is a land that comes in untapped. It taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 and tap it and make target legendary creature a god permanently, in addition to its other types, and we put a 1/1 counter on it. Or we can pay 4, tap, and sacrifice Tyrite Sanctum to put an indestructible counter on a target god. Heliod is already a god, so this is nice as a way to put counters on things. If we really want to spend our mana to do so, we can even put it on Heliod. He stays a god, you know? But this is really here as a protective ability. If we've got 4 other mana plus Tyrite Sanctum untapped, at instant speed, we can pay 4, tap, and sack the Tyrite Sanctum to make Heliod indestructible. Now that doesn't stick around forever if Heliod gets exiled or bounced or whatever, but it's a nice little bit of bonus protection if we happen to need that. And that about sums it up. Again, I'm making a deck for each of the March of the Machine legends. And I have been for a while, so feel free to check out my channel for the playlist, which will pop up on the screen in just a moment, of all the commander decks I've made so far. And I'm going to keep making them. So if there's a specific commander or deck style you'd like to see me build, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe, and remember, magic is fun. You should play more Magic.